So speaking of Diddy, because wait, before we go any further, let me say this. I need everybody to hit the like button. Hit the like button and share this video. If you have a question or comment, please send it in via super chat. I do have a goal. So like, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, share, 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 share. So I want to go into Diddy because tomorrow at 2 p.m., he does have, well, his lawyers, they did request a sentencing hearing. So it says Combs' lawyer requests that his sentencing not await the date the judge tentatively selected, which was October the 3rd. An issue will be when his probation can prepare a pre-sentencing report and whether the defense will accept less time to review it. So tomorrow they're asking the judge, can you push up his sentencing date from October to, I guess, whenever the judge feel, okay, I'll give you this date. It could be August.
But let me stop you right there. Yeah, I told you this before. The judge has the option of setting the motion for new trial first or the sentencing hearing first. The October date for the sentencing hearing is predicated on the motion for new trial coming first. Sometimes the judge will do the defense the favor of sentencing somebody before they get to the motion for new trial so everybody understands what's at stake. Now, that is what they're essentially doing. They have to have the pre-sentence report in. That's always the case. So there's no way around it. And yeah, you can expedite the matter. So that's what you're looking at. It's just routine procedure. It's no big thing.
Well, the question I want to ask you though, aside from that, the MANN Act sentencing guidelines.
It's not MANN Act. It's just the federal sentencing guidelines.
Well, we talked about this the other day. You brought it up and earlier today that now everybody's saying the MANN Act, because they wasn't saying that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a year and a half. And now listen to me. I know what I'm
saying. That was the only thing he was found guilty on.
Yeah, I got it. Now, let me say something with this. What they did is the original MANN Act says simply transporting females across state lines or international borders for illicit purposes. That was 115 years ago they came up with that. So what the devil do you mean by illicit purposes? Well, some decades ago, they attempted to amend the act and they said for purposes of prostitution, which as they defined it is engaging in sexual activity for money or economic gain. But that's why I wanted to bring up Kim Kardashian and Ray J. What they have in the entirety of the Diddy matter that they found him guilty of is his girlfriend and that Jane Doe, unmentioned, but everybody thinks they know who she is. They went across state or international lines. Money changed hands. They got money from the relationship and they engaged in sex shows, essentially. Now, if they had taped or recorded the sex shows and played them on Pornhub or Xfinity Adult Entertainment, what you would have is exactly what allegedly is transpired with Ray J and Kim Kardashian. They went across the Mexican border, that's an international border as specified in the statute. There was money involved, $4.95 a hit for 25 years at major hotels, motels, Xfinity, Comcast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's money involved. They did allegedly exactly the same thing that we spent all of these millions of dollars trying to go after Diddy for. There is no difference, except we did not get anybody slapped around with the obvious pimp game. It was a contrivance between two young individuals. So what is the difference? And this is what I'm talking about. Why do we prosecute Diddy, a celebrity, a billionaire who's not supposed to be anything except a hood rat thug with no money, which defeats the representations of what we just saw on the tape where it's all about money? It's not, because remember, this is somebody with a billionaire status. So he's getting jacked around because of what he knows or what he recorded or who he can expose. And that has absolutely nothing to do with what the person was talking about. Justifies everything, and it's not fair. It's not fair, period, because nothing in the world is fundamentally fair. I had a steak, prime rib, bunch of meat the other day. Somebody took me out for my birthday. I had a great time, but something died so I could eat it. Do you think it was fair to the sheep, the cow, or whatever it was I was eating, or the chicken, or the duck, or the goose? You know, that's not fair.
Okay, so let me ask you this though. So the MANN Act sentencing guidelines, what
It's federal guidelines, not just for the MANN Act.
okay, so what would you know anything about that type of sentencing guidelines?
Well, yeah, from what you have with the MANN Act, he's already probably got a time served situation. The first person they went after that was the initial target for all of this, Jack Johnson, got 1 year when he was convicted. He got more than that for escaping. But
Well,
you see, what are we doing here? And then I put this in context. Geithner was formerly Secretary of the Treasury for the United States of America. One of his subordinate departments was IRS, since he ran the Treasury Department. 6 months before he became Treasury Secretary, he was convicted of defrauding IRS to the tune of $28 million. He got a 6-month suspended sentence and a $42,000 fine for defrauding IRS, the U.S. government, and the people of the United States of $28 million. Now, just think about it. Those same federal guidelines were applied to him. Now, somebody that also made the news, Wesley Snipes, a personal friend of mine, who I think had incompetent counsel representing him. Judge went off on the lawyers for his defense for not doing their job. He, because of their inadequacies, and he had a lot of money, remember, he's a well-off Hollywood celebrity. He got 1 year per failure to file a complete set of documents, 3 counts, and they ran consecutive, running wild because his lawyers didn't know what the hell to do. Mm-hmm. Now, you see the difference? That's not fair, but it's not for the obvious reasons. In one case, there is politics involved. $28 million worth of tax fraud is a hell of a lot more reprehensible than just failing to file a complete set of forms, but getting a refund check for $250,000 because you overpaid your taxes. You
right.
See how that works? That's not fair.
So let me play this clip here. See what this is.
For the first time tonight, we're hearing from one of the alternate jurors who sat through the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The man, who only identified himself as George, says he agrees with yesterday's verdict, which acquitted Combs of sex trafficking and racketeering charges. George was not part of the actual deliberations, but said the alternate jurors saw all the evidence given to the main jury during the 2-month trial. He says he understands how the jury came to their conclusion.
A copious amount of notes. Overall, I think 350 pages worth of notes. Because at the end, we weren't told who was an alternate, who was a main juror until literally the last second. I think reading all my notes and looking back at the evidence, I probably would have reached the same conclusion as the other jurors.
And when CNN asked about the video showing Combs attacking his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, here's what George had to say about that.
It was a very bad video. I think they showed it enough. I mean, they tried to show it both sides.
Did it make a difference to you in the actual charges that you would have had to deliberate over? Because he wasn't charged with
He wasn't charged with domestic violence, no.
Combs was convicted on the 2 prostitution-related offenses. He was denied bail and now awaits sentencing in jail. That is set for October.
That's a travesty, the denial of bail. And otherwise, to remember me pontificating about the evils of proof of other crimes, that's what they did. It had nothing to do with what he was convicted of. Not one thing. But they showed it trying to inflame the jury and influence public opinion. That's not what American justice is supposed to be about. But this wasn't the case for money, because who had the money? The defendant. But again, look, let me put something to you about it. I hate to run on like this, but it's complicated. And it's along this kind of thing. An appendectomy is fairly common, right?
Okay.
You get a root canal. That's fairly common, right?
Yes.
You get your tonsils taken out, fairly common. That's common. Putting a pacemaker in, or
that's common for older people.
Yeah, but the bottom line is what does a doctor have to go through in order to be able to do that, or a dentist have to go through in order to be able to do that? What happens when they start putting anesthesia in and they shoot you up with Novocaine, or the anesthesiologist puts you under and keeps you from dying, but keeps you under? It's complicated. So if somebody wants to understand what's going on, it's not something you can just say, oh, they just do this, put you under, and that's it. That doesn't give you anything. You still don't know what's happening, and you still wouldn't understand what happened to you. And if you want to find out what's going on, yeah. So sometimes when I go at length, I'm not trying to just be obnoxious about it. It's just, it's hard to explain simply. It's like a chess game too. How do you sit there and explain to somebody, this guy is really good at chess? You're playing here looking at what's on the board right in front of you, and he's trying to set you up for 6 moves in advance so he can get you. So he's looking at something you aren't looking, and you want me to explain the difference between what you're doing and what he's doing.
All right, so let me bring this into the fold. Let me bring this in because after the verdict, right, and he went back to his cell, it says Mr. Combs got a standing ovation from fellow inmates when a music mogul returned to the jail after being acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering in his federal trial in New York, providing what his lawyer says might have been the best thing he could do for incarcerated Black men in America. They all said, we never get to see anyone who beats the government. So yeah, the inmates that were in there with him applauded him because he beat the government. And RICO is it's supposed to be unbeatable, but
you can beat it.
Well, clearly we see it here.
I have on behalf of some of my defendants that I've represented. Now, this is what's going on. Like I said, less than 2% of the people that are in the federal penitentiaries, state penitentiaries, got found guilty by a jury. 97% plus pled guilty. So a whole lot of what you hear coming out from the inmates that need hope is just because they punked out and they did not have the nerve to go to trial. They were scared.
Well, I hear you. Some people don't have good lawyers. A lot of people don't have the dream team. And sometimes if you don't have money, you could buy you a good defense.
But you don't. But see, here's the problem. If you're broke, you get the public defender's office, and 9 times out of 10, the public defender's office is going to give you better representation than you can afford until you can afford the very, very, very best. And even then, like with Wesley Snipes, who had a lot of money, he didn't get very good representation. See, so you get good representation sometimes, and then you get the public defender's office, which is next best to that. If you have an unlimited budget, you can get a lot of research done, a lot of expert witnesses in you don't have to pay for that ordinarily, if you could afford it, to not be broke, you'd have to pay for yourself, and you can't. So there's this gap. And the other thing is, some of the public defenders are not in this for money. They're in it for purpose, for causes. It's like, again, power.
So
Who was most powerful, Henry Ford or Albert Einstein? Who had the most money? Who invented the atomic bomb? You see, it gets that way. So you have people
yeah,
that,
okay, so here's the thing with Einstein. That doesn't mean he had power because he invented the atomic bomb.
yeah, it means it had power because the
But
most powerful
no,
device
but then the government,
he
then,
came up with.
but the government took it and used it. And what power did he have after that?
Well, he's the one that told them they needed to use it. They did not know.
What
He's the
power?
one. In other words, if you know how it works, somebody may want what you have, and if you have it in here, you can control what they get to use. You can always say, I'm not telling. But as long as you keep telling, then you have a certain power. See, in other words, who was the most powerful man in the world? One of the most powerful men in the world in April 1945.
Who?
5-star General
Okay.
Eisenhower, who had 12 million men, the biggest army in world history, under his direct command. And he was collaborating with Zhukov and Stalin on the Russian side, who didn't quite have that many people to put up.
I'm gonna bring this into the fold here. Cassie is being sued by a former escort. So it says Clayton Howard, the former escort, who is suing Cassie and Diddy for drugging, manipulating, and traumatizing him. He believes Cassie revealed in Diddy's power, and when it came to getting what she wants,
that's one of the bases for the cases. If you listen to the evidence, she actually is more an accessory, an accomplice,
right.
a collaborator. And when she filed that civil suit, the Biden-Harris administration said, we've got a way to protect Miss Harris Imhoff and her ilk. We can go get her, threaten to prosecute her unless she will be a witness for us so we can get him the hell out of the way so he doesn't embarrass our side.
So apparently he was asked, well, why didn't you submit your lawsuit, right, last year along with everyone else? And he said that the prosecutors reached out to his lawyer to say, hey, can you just put a hold on it to after the trial?
Do that.
Let me finish. Can you put a hold on it to after the trial? Because Cassie was the prosecutor's main witness. So if he's coming in with a lawsuit on her and him, it does make her look bad and be more of, like you say, a conspirator.
See, if it was fair, everybody involved in that would have their law licenses stripped. That is highly
on the prosecutor side.
Yes, that's highly unethical. I've said many times, one of the most corrupt, unprincipled bunch of scoundrels you can find are career prosecutors. Not all of them, but too many of them. There's nothing wrong with being a prosecutor, but if you spend your entire legal career doing nothing but that, something's wrong with you as a human being. And they are corrupt. And that's one of the reasons that the system does not work. It's got nothing to do with how much money you have. It's got to do with just exactly what you said. We want to win, so to hell with justice and equity and fundamental fairness. We're going to manipulate this so we can win. Because what Cassie did is revealed by that. She solicited, she procured, She facilitated, she aided and abetted. She was as guilty of anything that they found Diddy guilty of as he was.
Right.
That whole thing about her getting beaten, that was domestic violence in one sense, and it was the typical pimp game in another. And every time you look at P-Valley, Beautiful Black, or any of this thing where we glorify this pimping stuff, and the young folk talking about, man, it's about pimping. That's what you're really referring to with the game. It's brutal, it's violent, and it's got to do with some males who have a lack of masculinity, because no real man would do that. Now,
so I wanna ask you. Well, let me say this about the guy that's suing her, Clayton Howard. She has money. She's $30 million richer. So
yeah, it's a money-making proposition. And by the way,
no, but
his whole thing.
People sue you if they know you got money. And now she has $30 million. So
Okay, but see, there is this punk factor. And I say, even if there's a legal defense to it, or it's legally defensible, or it's not illegal, there's the punk factor. Real men just don't do certain things. And if you're going to claim you got punked out, wow, what is that? You keep your mouth shut, hang your head in shame, and try to redeem yourself. You don't go around whining and try to, oh, look what happened to me.
Well, listen, they're gonna say, look what happened to me, if the person that they're suing it has millions.
But see, that's where you come in. When you start saying it's all about money, it ain't. That is not why people get declared heroes. They are not dying for the guy in the slit trench next to theirs. They're dying for a cause.
And you're right, it's not all about money, but people, to a lot of people, it is all about money, which is why you have these women allowing themselves to get urinated on their face and all this type of nasty things.
They have said to us sometimes when we did some of our X faces, some of the people defecating in somebody's mouth, and they've got that somebody participated in that. I mean, come on now. What kind of creep does stuff like that and enjoys it?
So I want to go a little.
Not saying anybody involved in this would be that completely low, but I mean, it happens. This S&M sadomasochistic thing. And by the way, with the financial resources, I'm surprised that they didn't get into that, but they ignored it, and they made the right call, apparently. And this juror that's talking here says, hey, that had nothing to do with the case. That was just thrown in. It was a gratuity, and the judge never should have allowed it. Right. He should have stripped it, ordered the jury to disregard it, and told them they were, well, that was one instruction he should have given, because the state did not tie that in. There was no need for that gratuitous proof of other crimes.